Sat Hashem, we're continuing on today in Masechet Megilla with Tet Amud Aleph, the top of the page. We're going to have really one long discussion today, which will be in two sections. First, we're going to go back to resolving the contradiction we left off with yesterday. Because on one hand, we have the Mishnah that says, Sfarim, please join us. Sfarim could be written in any language, and we have a Braita that says only in ashurit. So we'll explain a couple of other attempted answers, and then at the end we'll clarify the position of Shifman ben Gamliel, that he said Sfarim could only be written other than Hebrew in Greek. This is a fascinating Gemara we're going to learn today with a historical context that I just looked up briefly. It's amazing. History is so fascinating. I find it amazing. Okay, let's get started. You can join us if you want, Josh. Okay. So we left off yesterday, we had a contradiction, we had a stira. On one hand, our Mishnah said Sfarim could be written b'chol lashon, in any language, on Chet Amud Bet, 8b. Oh, Rebevi. Did you get my message?
I got you.
There we go. I reached out to them yesterday, I said, come, look at that. Boom. Baruch Hashem, come join us. If you want to get a Gemara, you want to bring two Gemarot, Megilla.
No,
Two
okay.
Gemarot.
No, for me,
Why not? Join.
a few minutes and then...
Alright, fine.
Okay.
If you want to get a Gemara,
So I want to
get a
You wanna
Gemara,
get a Gemara,
Megillah,
book.
get a
Oh, no,
Gemara.
I'm good.
Okay, so you can sit, please sit. Please sit, take a seat. Yesterday we left off with a contradiction. On one hand, our Mishnah told us that Sfarim could be written b'chol lashon, in any language. On the other hand, we had a Braita that said, if you wrote in Sfarim, you wrote a pasuk in Aramaic, or an Aramaic pasuk, which we'll get to examples of that later, was an Aramaic pasuk in Hebrew. It's pasul, it's not metameh hayadayim, meaning it's not considered a proper sefer, ad sheyichtevenu ashurit, unless it was written in ashurit. And what's ashurit? Ashurit is Hebrew that we know in the Sefer Torah. That's it. So the question we had is it b'chol lashon, or is it specifically in lashon hakodesh? So Rava gave us a very interesting answer yesterday. Remember Rava's answer? Rava told us it doesn't depend as much as the spoken language as much as the written script. Yeah. What does that mean? It means if you take a foreign language, if you want to go out, don't make noise. If you take a foreign language like Spanish and you transliterate that into Hebrew lettering, that would be an acceptable sefer. So that means if you wrote, just to be very clear, if you took English and instead of writing in the beginning, Bereshit, I-N, in, the, Dalet Aleph, beginning, Bet, Yud, Gimel, etc., you wrote in the beginning but using Hebrew lettering. Aleph, Yud, Nun, in, the, Dalet Aleph, the. That would, says Rava, that would actually be acceptable. That would be considered ashurit. That's what the Braita is saying. The Mishnah means b'chol lashon is you can use transliteration from other languages, but if you used a foreign lettering, that would not be acceptable for Sfarim. That's what Rava left off with yesterday. Let me just explain the question Abai is about to ask on Rava, and then we'll see it inside. Abai is going to say is, great answer. The problem is it doesn't fit in the Braita. Why not? Because in the Braita seems to say, if you wrote a pasuk in Aramaic or an Aramaic verse in Hebrew, it's not going. Why is it mentioning other languages? The issue really is that it was written in a foreign lettering. The issue is not that it was a different language. That way you're explaining the Braita is the highlight of the Braita is it has to be written in Hebrew lettering. So why is it consequential what language it's written in? That's inconsequential. It doesn't make a difference. So therefore that can't be the pshat in the Braita. That's what Abai is about to say to Rava. Sion Bokatov. So let's see, top of the page. Amar le Abaye. Abaye says to Rava, how did you explain that Braita bigufan shelahen? That you're saying it's referring to their lettering. I mean, the issue in the Braita is you're using foreign letterings, a different language's lettering. That's the issue. So Ma'ir ya mikra shekatvo targum, targum shekatvo mikra. What's the difference then that the Braita highlights? It's a pasuk that was written in Aramaic or vice versa. Even if it was a pasuk written in the Hebrew language, v'targum shekatvu targum, or it was Aramaic written in Aramaic, about here. Nami, it would also be a problem. Dakatani, because the Braita says it has to be written in Hebrew lettering. And the way you're explaining that, the issue isn't the language, the issue is the lettering. So what's the highlight of Hebrew, Aramaic? That's inconsequential. So Abai says that can't be the pshat then. Eller, Abaye says another idea. Lo kashin. This is a very difficult answer, but we'll just read it. Abaye says, Harabanan, Harab Shimon Gamliel. Remember, we had a machloket in the Mishnah. When it comes to writing Sfarim, Rashi again learned it's Sifrei Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, in the scrolls that they used to have. We have books, but they had scrolls, all of it in scrolls. So when it comes to Sifrei Tanakh, the Mishnah reflects the position of the Rabbanan. They say it could be Bechol Lashon. The Braita that says only in ashurit is Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Now what does Rav Shimon ben Gamliel say in the Mishnah? It could be written in Hebrew or in Greek. So the problem is, the Gemara is about to say is, but it's not reflective, meaning that you're saying the Braita is like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, but Rav Shimon ben Gamliel holds they could also be written in Greek. So why does the Braita say only ashurit? So this answer is very difficult. I don't need to work on it. So the Gemara says, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, if this Braita is Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, hayika Yavanit, but he said in the Mishnah, the other language you could write Sfarim is Greek, so you can't just say that's Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. So Ella, the Gemara gives a third attempt at answer. Lo kashya. Kan bisfarim. This that we say that it's Bechol Lashon in the Mishnah, that's talking about Sfarim. General Sfarim. They could be written Bechol Lashon, meaning Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, that could be in any language. And Kan b'tfilin mezuzot. And this actually is, the Gemara accepts the idea but rejects the answer. Tfilin and mezuzot. What's written inside of tfilin and mezuzot? Amongst other things, Shema. Shema. Shema needs to be written only in ashurit, only in Hebrew. That can't be written in a different language. So that's what the Braita is talking about when it says only in ashurit. It's tefillin and mezuzot with Shema that can only be written in Hebrew. Fine. Tefillin and mezuzot, my time. What's the reason tefillin and mezuzot could only be written in Hebrew? Because in Vayetchanan, when it talks about the parasha of Shema, it says vehayu, vahayu hadvarim ha'ele. Vahayu. What does vahayu mean? They shall be. They shall be means it has to be in its format. That's the idea. So therefore, when it comes to Shema, which is in Tefillin and Mezuzot, it has to be in its original format in Hebrew, no other language. It has to stay in its way. But the Gemara says that's a great answer. The only problem with this, and by the way, the Gemara accepts this actually, that Shema is only written in Hebrew, not in other languages, and that's how you're explaining the Braita of Ashurit. The issue is that the Braita said Mikra that's written in Targum, Hebrew that's written in Aramaic, or vice versa. There's no Aramaic words in Shema, so it doesn't really fitting it back into the Braita doesn't work. So my Targum shekatfu ika, Mikra ika. But what Aramaic that you could write in Hebrew exists in Shema? It doesn't really exist, so that can't be the pshat in the Braita. Bishlam Torah says like this. In regards to the Torah, we do find Aramaic words. Where do we find Aramaic words in the Torah? No, Yosef?
In Tanakh, in Daniel, and other places.
Okay, that's true, but in the Torah itself, where do we find? I'm sure you know. Where in the Torah do we find? I'll give you a hint. Where in the Torah do we find Aramaic words? Aramaic words. I'll tell you a hint. It's regarding interactions between Yaakov and Lavan.
Not Aramaic, I can't remember.
It's a hard one. It's a little bit like a random side plot. When Yaakov and Lavan meet up at the end of the story, Lavan's chasing him. Remember the story. And Lavan's upset that he ran away. He should have told him that he was running away. So finally Hashem says, don't touch Yaakov. You can't do anything to him. They meet up in this location. Yaakov calls it Gal Ed. And Lavan calls it Yegar Sa'aduta. Yegar Sa'aduta is the Aramaic translation of Gal Ed. The Torah records this. So that's Aramaic that's written in the Torah. But in Shema, we don't find this. So the question is, you can't say the Braita is talking about Tefillin and Mezuzot because we don't find Aramaic in Shema. In regards to the Torah, we do find Aramaic, Yegar Sa'aduta. But in Tefillin and Mezuzot, where do we find Aramaic? So back to the question. Oh, and this is accepted. Regarding Megillat Esther, that is when the Mishnah said, the Braita says it could only be written in Ashurit, only in Hebrew. The Mishnah is talking about all other Sfarim, and that could be written B'chol Lashon. Asks the Gemara, Megillah, my time, what's the reason? Megillah only can be written in Hebrew, because it says, Kichtavam v'chilshonam. What does that mean? In their writing and in their language, meaning that the Megillah need to be written specifically in its original language, not in any other language. So there's a unique exception by Megillah. So the Gemara is okay. You're saying the Braita is referring to the Megillat Esther, but what Aramaic do we find in the Megillah so that it fits back into the Braita? So So my Targum shekatvu mikra'ika, but what Aramaic is in the Megillah? So the Gemara gives a series of examples. You know any of them? Aramaic in the Megillah. Yeah, an interesting thing. Amra Papa, it's yeah. V'nishma pitgam hamelech. They heard the pitgam hamelech. Pitgam is the decree. The decree of the king became heard. It's like Gezerah or Dvar. The word of the king. Pitgam is Aramaic. That's example number one. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, V'chol anashim yitnu yikar leba'aleihen. All the women will give yikar to their husbands. What's yikar? Honor. But that's in Aramaic. Rav Ashi Amar Kitanya. So fine, that's the first answer. So the first answer, and this is accepted, is that the Braita is talking about the Megillah. That could only be written in Hebrew. And the Mishnah is talking about other Sfarim could be written b'chol lashon. Beautiful.
So those two are examples in chapter 1, Megillah Esther. Like
correct.
Towards
Yes.
the end.
Exactly.
The last one is very close to the last pasuk.
Yikar. Exactly. Now Rav Ashi says a second answer, and this has a very interesting historical background to it. But let's see it inside, and then we'll explain. Rav Ashi says like this: Kitanyahi, when the Braita said it could only be written in Hebrew, that's Bishar Sfarim. It's talking about all other Sfarim, as opposed to, as we'll see in a moment, the Torah. As opposed to the Torah, meaning Nevi'im Ktuvim, the rest of the Sfarim, that is only an ashurit, but the Torah could be written b'chol lashon. Now, why do we make this distinction? So let's see. Rabbi Yehuda, it's the position of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya, as the Braita explains as follows. The Braita says, now, first we're going to read the Braita at face value. The Gemara is going to challenge the simple understanding and we'll reevaluate what it means. The Braita says, Tefillin mezuzot ein nichtavin el ashurit. Tefillin mezuzot are only written in Hebrew. V'rabotenu hitiru, and the rabbis, which actually we see refers to Shifman and Gamliel, permitted Yevanit. They permitted it could be written in Greek. The Gemara says, Bavachti vayu. We know that Tefillin mezuzot, it says vayu, it could only be written in Hebrew. How could they permit Greek? So Elaima, what? No, this is the debate. Sfarim nichtavim b'chol lashon. Sfarim, the Tanakama says, could be written in any language. V'rabotenu itiru Yevanit. And Shifman and Gamliel permitted also in Greek, which reflects the Mishnah like we saw. Itiru, but the Gemara says still that it's still difficult to understand. What do you mean they permitted Greek? Michlal Tanakama Asar, that you're saying it implies that the Tanakama does not allow Greek, but the Tanakama said, b'chol lashon, permits every language. Ela emas, rather, what's the pshaz like this? Rabotenu lo itiru sheyichtavu ela Yevanit. Tanakama said that the Torah could be written b'chol lashon. Rabban Shimon Gamliel, the Rabotenu, said it could be written in Hebrew and in Greek. The Torah could only be written in the other language, could be Greek. That's the only other acceptable language.
Can't write a Torah in any other language.
So I don't know if we paskin this way, but look at this. What's the pshat? Where does Greek come from? Where does Greek come from? This is a fascinating backstory here. The Tanya and the Braita explains.
The Greeks wanted the Torah in Greek.
That's the story. You know the story. Good.
Yeah.
The fascinating story. I'll tell you, I looked it up because I'll tell you in a second. The Tanya and the Braita says like this: Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Af k'sheitu raboteni Yevanit. Even though the rabbis, Shifman and Gamliel, permitted the Torah to be written also in Greek, but lo itiru ela b'sefer Torah. It's only by the Sefer Torah, not by Nevi'im and Ktuvim, and not by the rest of the Sfarim. Umishum said the Talmai HaMelech. It's because of the story of Talmai HaMelech. Now this is a very interesting backstory. Talmai HaMelech, Rashi learns here, was an Egyptian king. The language of Talmai sounds very much like Ptolemy, right? Ptolemy, with a P. Ptolemy. Ptolemy was an Egyptian king, you know. King Ptolemy. I went to Megilla education. Come on. Yeah, Ptolemy, come on. King Ptolemy. I looked it up now. It's very interesting. King Ptolemy was a king in Egypt. I assume it's the same person. I think RSbG probably writes Ptolemy. Where is it here?
Yeah.
Do they write Ptolemy? Yeah. They write Ptolemy, fine. Talmai HaMelech, and the Gemara calls him Talmai. The Egyptian culture was such that it was a very, very interesting thing. This was about 200 years before the turn of the Common Era, as we know it, or whatever. 300 or 200, I looked it up anyways. Talmai HaMelech was the king in Egypt, but he spoke Greek. That was the common language. And I was trying to figure it out. As we're about to see, he had the rabbis write the Torah in Greek. I understand if he's Egyptian, why didn't have it? So apparently the spoken language, I looked this up, was actually Greek because he was a Egyptian king, but considered a Greek monarch, this guy. I was like flipping through Wikipedia to try to get backstory on this. Very interesting. They had a system where they would marry brothers and sisters together because they wanted to keep the what they considered like pure, keep everything. That ended up destroying Malchuyot. But anyways, either way, the point is that this Talmai had a plan. He wanted that the Torah would be translated into their spoken language, which was Greek. Now, why did he want that? I don't know if that was perhaps so we could see if there's secrets in the Torah that the rabbis are withholding from him. I'm not sure exactly what his focal point was.
He wanted to make sure that all the rabbis were on the same page, otherwise there would be a mistake or something.
Well, you're saying L'Shem Shamayim, you're saying it was like a very virtuous reason? A test?
It was a test.
The 70 rabbanim.
That all the rabbis had to be, that they all were able to translate it exactly the same way.
But why? What was his motivation for that? I'm not sure exactly what his motivation
was. To show if it
was.
was true or not.
To show if it was true. Perhaps it was to poke fun at it, to show that there was errors. But what we're going to see is, Talmai gathered, the Gemara's Ger says, 72 rabbis, put them in 72 different rooms, and he said, translate Torat Moshe Rabchem, translate the Torah into Greek, Yevanit. The problem was that there's certain sections of the Torah that we know the pshat in. We're not bothered at because we have Rishonim, we have Mefarshim who explain it to us. But if they would have translated it straight, so then it would have given Talmai ability to either make fun of it, show it's not true, because he wouldn't necessarily appreciate what Rashi says. Meaning that's the point. So Hashem gave special wisdom to these 72 rabbis, and each of them made the same changes in their translation so as to avoid the arguments of Talmai after he reads it. It was a miraculous situation. But the point we're bringing all this is to show that the Torah was once translated into Greek. Once it was translated into Greek, Reb Shimon Gamliel says the Torah could be written in Greek as well. It was like Mina Shamayim, it was necessary. But other languages, you don't have the same allowance, but that's only by Torah. Nevi'im and Ketuvim wasn't translated into Greek, and therefore that would be the distinction. Let's see this inside. The Tanya, the Braita, explains as follows. Ma'aseh b'Talmai HaMelech. There was a story with his king Talmai. Again, he was an Egyptian king, but he spoke Greek. Shekines shivim v'shnayim zkenim. He gathered 72 of the Chachamim. Ve'chnisan b'shivim v'shnayim batim. He put them in 72 different rooms, so they couldn't communicate. No WhatsApp back then. And he did not reveal to them what he had put them there for. And he went to each of them separately. He said to them, Kitvuli Torat Moshe Rabchem, write for me the Torah of Moshe, your master. So now they had an issue, because if they would translate literally, he would be able to use it against them, use it as fodder. Either he could say, you want to rebel against me, or it's not true, use it in a negative way. So Natan HaKadosh Baruch Hu belev kol echad ve'echad eitzah. Hashem gave advice in the hearts of every one of the rabbis, ve'eskimu kulan l'da'at achat, and they all have the same agreed changes, as we'll see. Ve'katvu lo. So we're going to go through the changes, and I'll explain as Rashi understands why they changed it. Essentially, what mistake he would have been able to point at, and therefore they made it some sort of a change. Now again, as we go through these, we're not bothered by these because we know what the pshat is based on the Rishonim and the Mefarshim, but he wouldn't necessarily accept that. So they wrote in the beginning, instead of writing Bereshit bara Elokim, in the beginning of God's creation, they wrote Elokim bara Bereshit. Now why did they flip that around? Because if you write Bereshit bara Elokim, it sounds like there's a force called Bereshit, and Bereshit created Elokim. So that's Kfirah. That would be a problem. So they switched it. Elokim bara Bereshit, number one. They also wrote, I will create man in the image and form, as opposed to writing, we will create man. Now we know, Rashi tells us, it teaches us Hashem's humility, that he included the Malachim, etc. But if you write we, what does it sound like? There's more than one power, so therefore they wrote, I will. Now the Torah tells us by Shabbat, when Hashem created Shabbat, it says he rested on the seventh day. We know the pshat is because Hashem is able to rest. He knows how to be medayek exactly on the second in terms of calculating when is the Friday and when is Shabbat. But if they would have written that, it would sound like God was working on Shabbat. So they wrote instead, he rested on the sixth day, and then he worked on the sixth day and he rested on the seventh. Zachar nekeva bara'o. Instead of writing bara'am, he created them, male and female. I just learned this actually in Brachot, that Hashem created male and female, but them in a plural language, he wrote created him, because otherwise it sounds like that there were two males and females that were created. It means there were two creatures, which was not true. Velo katvu bar'am. Hava erda ve'evla sham sifatam. This is by the Dor Haflaga in Parashat Noach. It says, I will go down and mix up their languages. Remember the generation that built this tower to rebel against Hashem. Again, in the same idea as when Hashem created man. He said in a plural language, let us go mix them up. Again, it's humility. It shows us derech eretz, a lot of things. But he wouldn't necessarily appreciate, so they wrote it singular. Now, regarding Sarah, it says when she hears the news of the Malachim, it says she laughed, it says Bikirba, she laughed inside of her. So if he would have heard that, he would say, why is it that Sarah is held to task and Avraham, who also laughed, was not held accountable? We know the answer is because, as Rashi explains, one of them laughed, Avraham, and he had emunah, and Sarah laughed and she didn't. So however you understand it, obviously, Sarah Imenu was a huge tzaddik. But the point is, they changed it so he wouldn't have this issue, and they wrote, Batitzchak Sarah bikroveha. She laughed with her relatives. So meaning what happened was she started to tell everyone and make fun. Then she was held accountable. Okay, we know that's not the story. Now, regarding the curses or the blessings at the end of Yaakov's life, Yaakov said to Shimon and Levi, Ki ba'apam hargu shor. Really, he said, Ki ba'apam hargu ish. In their anger, they killed a man. Uvirtzonam akru shor. And in their desire, they uprooted a ox. Now, Talmud would look at this and say, you see, your ancestors killed men, that they were murderers, Shimon and Levi. What's it referring to? Referring to how Shimon and Levi killed out the city of Shem, and also with Yosef, they had him sold. But either way, so they changed it. Ki ba'apam hargu shor. In their anger, they killed an ox, and in their desire, v'rtzanam akru avos. They overturned avos. They overturned a trough. Again, so they're not murderers. Now the Psukim tell us, we had this recently in the beginning of Sefer Shemot.
They did the whole Torah.
They went through every section. Really, we're going to see they went through particular sections. They translated the whole Torah, but it gives us a series of examples of what they changed. We get an idea of what they were doing.
It could have been a lot more changes than we're saying.
Not clear.
Is this all the changes?
It's not clear if this is an exhaustive list. It sounds like the Gemara would be an exhaustive list, but it could be there were other changes too. We know when Moshe Rabbeinu was told to go back to Mitzrayim to redeem the Jewish people, so it says he put his wife and children on a chamor, a donkey. So if Talmud would see this, he would say, well, they didn't have a company car. Can you give him a Cadillac? Can you give him something good? A donkey? So they changed it. Vayikach Moshe et ishto ve'et banav vayirkivem al nosei b'nei Adam. He rode them al nosei b'nei Adam. What's nosei b'nei Adam? Those things that carry people. It's an expression, it refers to a camel. It's a more elite form of travel. As opposed to saying chamor will be, degrading. Now, the Pasuk tells us the Jews were in Mitzrayim for 400 years. They weren't in Mitzrayim for 400 years. They were in Mitzrayim for 210 years. So we know it's calculating back from the birth of Yitzchak, fine. But they changed it so he wouldn't have a question. Moshe b'nei Yisrael asher yashvu b'Mitzrayim, the dwelling of the Jewish people in Mitzrayim, uvishar aratzot, and in other lands, 400 shana, for 400 years. Now, when it says by Har Sinai, the Na'arei b'nei Yisrael went to greet Hashem, the young ones. So Talmud would say, why are you sending the young ones? That's disrespectful. You should send the noblemen, the respected people. So they changed it. Vayishlach et za'atute b'nei Yisrael, vel za'atute b'nei Yisrael lo shalach yado. Za'atute is a different language. It means the noblemen, the respected people. Now, by the way, in each of these examples, you have to go through and say, why would the Torah write it in a misleading way in the first place? We don't have time for that now, but one day it's kedai to go through, why would the Torah write it that way if perhaps it has somewhat of a negative connotation? It's kedai to think about it. Turning to Tatamud Bet. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu tells Korach and his congregation, when they're having all these claims against him, that you're seizing power for your own benefits, etc., he told them, Lo chamor echad mehem nasati. I never took even one donkey from you. So Talmud could say to that is, maybe he didn't take a donkey, but he took something else. So instead, they changed it to, Lo chamad echad mehem nasati. I never took a desirable thing from you. I never took anything from you. Now, in regards to in Vayet Hanan, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that I separated the sun, moon, and stars, that you're not meant to worship them. So it says, Asher chalak Hashem Elokecha otam, Hashem separated them, Laha'ir lechol ha'amim. Now, really, the pasuk says, full pasuk says, what is the pasuk? Do you have the verse with you here? Let's see what it says. Pasuk reads, sorry. Thank you. I should read the pasuk. Yeah. The pasuk reads like this. It says regarding the sun, the moon, the stars, the other astrological signs, lest you stray after them and you bow to them, and you serve them, asher chalak Hashem Elokecha otam lechol ha'amim tachat kol hashamayim. Hashem separated those things for the other nations under the heavens. Now, Talmud would look at that pasuk and say, it seems like Ben Noach is allowed to do avodah zarah. Hashem separated those features for the other nations to serve. So that sounds like they're allowed to do avodah zarah, but a Ben Noach is not allowed. So they changed it. Asher chalak Hashem Elokecha otam leha'ir lechol ha'amim. Hashem put the sun, moon, and stars to shine, to create light for the entire world, but not that they're allowed to serve it. They added a word in here. Really, the pasuk says, and a person might go, it's Parashat Shoftim, and serve a foreign god, asher lo tziviti, that I didn't command. Now, one could look at that and say, Hashem didn't command it into creation, which means it's its own power. It created itself. So in order to avoid that, they said, lo ovdam, Hashem didn't command you to serve them. That's the point. It means you're not allowed to serve them. And the final change they made was, when it talks about the kosher and non-kosher animals, it says the rabbit. But what is the rabbit called in the Torah? Arnevet. The problem was, in Parashat Shmini, it writes Arnevet, and Arnevet was the wife of Talmai HaMelech. So he would have said, you see, they put my wife as a non-kosher animal. Now, I looked it up, I was trying to figure out what was his wife's names. He had a bunch of wives, so I couldn't figure it out. But probably there's some Greek translation that would be rabbit. They wrote, instead of writing Arnevet, they wrote the short-footed creature, referring to a rabbit. Like it says in Shmini, they didn't write Arnevet, because his wife's name was Arnevet, and then he would say, they're making fun of me, they put my wife's name in the Torah as a non-kosher creature. All right, let's just finish this up. So we had in the Mishnah Rav Shimon Gamliel's position, but because just to be clear, so the second answer, which was Rav Ashi, is to answer the Braita in the Mishnah, is that the Mishnah is talking about Nevi'im and Ketuvim. The Torah is Rav Shimon Gamliel could only be written in Greek other than Hebrew because of this story, but that's only by Torah, that's not by the other things. Fine. Now, the Mishnah told us Rav Shimon Gamliel, Omer ach b'sfarim lo yitir sheyichtavu eli Yavanit. Rav Shimon Gamliel said the only other language Torah could be written is in Greek. Now, there's two ways to understand Rav Shimon Gamliel now. Either that means all of Tanakh, or it only means Torah, like Rabbi Yehuda was just teaching us in the previous answer. Amar Rabbi Yavo, we'll just finish up here. Amar Rabbi Yavo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, halacha Rav Shimon Gamliel. Very interesting. The halacha follows Rav Shimon Gamliel. You're allowed to write the Torah in Greek. No other language, but you could write it in Greek. For Amar Rabbi Yochanan, my time is Rav Shimon Gamliel. What's the reason? Where does this come from? So we already said one reason, and we made a distinction between Torah and Nach. But the Gemara says another reason now. Amar Kra. This is after the story where the sons of Noach engage in one of the grandsons disgraces Noach. Sorry, one of the sons disgraces Noach. We had, who are the three sons of Noach? We had Shem, Cham, and Yefet. Right, Yefet. So
Cham was the one that was making a big...
Cham disgraced his father.
He was, yeah.
And Shem and Yefet,
they came back,
honored their father.
Right.
And let's remember the story. You don't have to go through details right now, but that was the story. Good. So afterwards, Noach curses Cham and blesses Shem and Yefet. Now, Shem, we know, is the ancestor of
Abraham.
Semites. That's the Jewish people. Fine. But Yefet also received the bracha. So what does it say there? It says, Yaft Elokim liyefet, the beauty of Hashem will be for Yefet, v'yishkon be'ohel Shem, and he will dwell in the tent of Shem. What does it mean? So the way that the Gemara explains is like this. Dvarav shel Yefet yeyu be'ohel Shem. The words of Yefet, the language of Yefet, shall be in the tents of Shem. What are the tents of Shem? We know. Ohalei Torah. Right? Yoshev Ohalim. What is that referring to? Torah. The language of Yefet could be used in writing Torah. What's the language of Yefet? Well, one of the descendants of Yefet was Greek. So therefore so the Gemara says, okay, but that was only one of the descendants of Yefet. How do you know that it's Greek that was chosen? He had many other descendants. Maybe it was a different descendant with other languages. But the reason is, it says, Yaft Elokim liyefet. The beauty of God will be for Yefet. Very interesting. Greek apparently is a beautiful language. This is the beauty of God, the beautiful language.
It didn't exist then, Greek.
So, 70 languages was when the languages were split up already. That was the Dora Flaga.
Greek was one of them.
Greek was one of them, right. And that's why, by the way, we sometimes find in the Torah itself, there's words that are adopted from foreign languages. a freaky katpi. We just had it by totafot. We have it. There's certain places. We just said Aramaic is in the Torah, different languages. The beauty of Yefet should be in the tense of Shem. So really it comes out, we have two, we're going to stop here at the Mishnah, but really it comes out that there's two answers. Either we're saying the reason Greek was accepted, according to Shifman Gamliel, but specifically for Torah, based on the story of Talmai HaMelech. Alternatively, which goes the entire Torah, doesn't necessarily limit it to Torah, even Nevi'im and Ketuvim, it's based on Yaft Elokim Liyefet. It was a haftacha that the Torah could also be written in Greek. Other than Hebrew. But the Gemara says we pass in Shifman Gamliel, which sounds like you can't write it in a different language. Only either Hebrew or Greek. Exception being, Tefillin and Mezuzot we said you can't, and Megilla we said you can't. Why by you, Biktavam, it says to be in their languages. Stop at the Mishnah, Zat Hashem will pick up tomorrow. Everyone have a wonderful day.